Tasso Azevedo, thank you very much for joining us and speaking to the forum today. You were a keynote speaker with the Minister. You are the coordinator for biomass and a former chief of the Brazilian Forest Service. Just tell me a little bit about that, how that experience comes to inform what you said to the forum today.
Yeah, so what we do today, for the last 8 years, is to basically we divide Brazil in pieces of 30 by 30 meters. And then there is 9 billion of them. And for each one of them, we tell the story of the land use. So it's like if we take this room here, and I say, well, this room was a forest back in 85, and then in 2002, it transformed into pasture land and then agriculture and so on. And because you have the story of each piece, each pixel, then you can tell the story of how land use is changing over time. And so this is extremely important in the case of Brazil and other tropical countries. We have been doing this in all throughout South America and also Indonesia, is the fact that there is a lot of dynamics on changing the land use, different from Europe, for example. It's much more stable. And this makes the greenhouse gas emissions from our country to be really attached to the land use. So, and then I was explaining this to the public, saying Brazil is the 5th largest greenhouse gas emitter after China, US, Russia, and India. But those 4 countries, they have the bulk of their emissions coming from burning of fossil fuels. And in our case, we are very good on this part of the energy, a lot of renewables and et cetera, but the way we use the land makes 75% of our greenhouse gas emissions. So by studying all those changes that are happening in the land, we learn a lot about what's the dynamics that drives Brazil into deforestation or in the different changes in agriculture and so on.
It must make a fascinating tapestry to break down these parcels of land and to look at it in that way. And Jane Goodall was our inspirational speaker this morning, the anthropologist, who talked about the tapestry of the ecosystem. And once you pull one thread, then it's the moment at which it unravels the tapestry. We know the Amazon as the lungs of the world, and we know about deforestation. So these are very big issues, aren't there? Did you have a call to action in terms of your speech today?
I think that the interesting thing is about, in the way the things are occupied in Brazil, is that if you look at the picture, there is, 66% of Brazil is still forest and native vegetation. It's a great picture, right? Now, but if you look at the movie, then it's very complicated because we lose an area the size of France and Italy together in natural habitats that were converted to farming in the last 35 years. So the thing for us is that we have to move fast, to stop to actually make this conversion and just, because it's possible just to increase the production in Brazil just by using better the land that is already converted than to go to the new habitats. And the problem with that is that as you go to those habitats, increasing pressure there, it's actually changing, for example, the raining patterns, which ultimately affects the farming itself, right? So we see those signs in the Amazon, because the Amazon, more than the lungs of the planet, as we say, it's our shower, in Brazil. It's where we get the water. The water comes from the Amazon, it's transported by the trees, is to go down to to the southeast and the center of Brazil. So the protection of the forests, it's on the interest of ourselves and in the interest of the planet, because it helps to cooling also the planet. So.
And there are strong goals. We know that with climate crisis, we know with the IPCC report recently, when we're thinking about the 1.5 degree target that might well be missed, that you are aiming for zero deforestation and therefore reducing by 50% greenhouse gases by 2030.
Yeah, the important here is that the forest is not just like a storage of carbon. What the science is showing us is actually it has a cooling effect on the planet. So if you take the cooling effect, which is equivalent to 0.5 degrees, plus the amount of carbon that is there, that if it released, will add 0.5 degrees in the temperature, it means the forest is responsible for 1 degree in all these equations. So if you have a target with 1.5, and we are on 1.1, And forests account for one. I mean, we are dead if we don't protect the tropical forests in particular. So the target is to move this very fast. And so in terms of call of action that you were asking us, I was explaining that like deforestation is mostly illegal operation happening in Brazil. But on the other side, it's just a minority of the production that is linked to deforestation. In the last 4 years, just 2% of the properties in Brazil had some deforestation. So what I was suggesting is that, first, it's welcome, the new legislation in Europe on, avoiding deforestation in supply chains. But we have to be very careful that does not transform this into a kind of a block for products coming from the tropical forest, because this will be a disincentive for all those 98% that are not involved on deforestation. But it's very important that as a global community, we understand that protecting the forest also has costs. And we should have a way to recognize the work that has been done to protect those forests. On a medium long term, this will be extremely important to maintain them
and to
and the
compensate
services.
those that contribute to it. And of course, I think one of the parts of the discussion was there needs to be political will. So, you have Lula now. Does that mean change? You potentially have COP30, the Amazon.
Yeah, I think it's important. Like, if you think about like some of the speech that we have this morning, they talk about some of the policies you have in Europe, for example, to subsidize, or in a positive way, subsidize the protection of the environment and the change on the practices, right? Which I think it's really important. But we have to think about how can we actually do something at global scale in terms of the protection of tropical forests, and this will be important. So I think the change that we are having in Brazil is an important aspect, because, I mean, who will support someone that is not protecting their own treasure, right? So, and that's exactly what's happening in Brazil. Like, the Amazon is our most important asset and treasure for us and for the planet. So now, if we have someone like the new president that is publicly speaking and assuming the commitment for the protection of the forest, I think give us a perspective in which it's much easier to help and to mobilize the global community for this effort.
Well, good luck with it. Thank you so much, Tasso.
Thank you.
Pleasure.